Welcome to the training video in helping you to prepare for your upcoming trip to Africa on behalf of our company. Congratulations, you've been selected. Throughout this video, I will be going over a couple of things that you might need to know, some frequently asked questions, and hopefully we can get everything answered before you depart for your trip. Starting off, what are you going to need before you go? Firstly, you're going to need a passport, and if you don't already have one, then you need to apply to get one several months before your departure date. And if you already have one, it needs to still be valid 30 days prior before the day you leave Africa. So you need to make sure those two things are ensured, as well as you're going to need 2 consecutive empty visa pages. That doesn't include the endorsement pages. If you don't have these, then you won't be able to get into Africa. So these are really important. You need to make sure you have these. Secondly, money. There is a limit to how much money you can bring into Africa. You can bring up to 25,000 ZAR, or you can bring up to $10,000 or the equivalent of $10,000 in other currencies other than the US. Alright, now there are a couple things that you need to be aware of before you enter Africa. And that some of those things are the dominant religion and language. Christianity and Islam are the dominant religions, and most of the people there are going to be able to speak Arabic. Africa has a lot of languages and religions, but those are the main ones that they use. So when you're there, if you don't speak the language and you don't understand the religion and their customs, then maybe do some research on that, just to familiarize yourself with that kind of culture. Make sure to stay when you're there. Make sure to stay near locals that can help you translate. There are English speakers in bigger cities in Africa, so just make sure you're aware and stay with your tour guide. I think that would be the safest thing. Crime rates are pretty high. Petty crime rates in particular are pretty high in Africa. For tourists, the most likely crime that could be committed is like a robbery. So just for safety measures, make sure you stay away from dark alleys. Make sure you stay near crowded areas, and just stay with your tour guide, because your tour guide is gonna be a local, and they'll know what kind of areas to avoid and which areas are more friendly to tourists. Another thing, if you're planning on buying any souvenirs or anything, you need to be aware of the animal laws and wildlife laws that they have there in Africa. Be careful when purchasing your souvenirs. Make sure there's not anything that's illegal. You can't be killing or eating or capturing any kind of protected animal there, and that goes with any souvenirs that somebody else might have killed, and it could have been an endangered animal. So just be aware of that, because you could be arrested for partaking in any of that. So just be aware of that. These are a couple of the protected animals that I was talking about. There's the African penguin, and of course you might not know exactly if it's like a meat or something. Just do your best to avoid any sketchy areas. The chimpanzee, coyote, the black rhino, giraffe. Just be aware of this. It's really important to stay safe. Speaking of safety, health and safety is super important. Everywhere it's important, but especially if you're in a place that you're not familiar with, it's especially important. Contact information for emergencies are going to be different. The equivalent to 911 here in America would be 112 in Africa, in South Africa. Africa is very large, and there's a lot of dead zones in Africa, so having a mobile phone on you at all times is going to be really important, just for safety. Um, 10111 is for the South American police station. Now, it is important to realize that policing in Africa isn't very manned. They're very undermanned in Africa. So if there's gonna be an emergency, it's actually better if you rely on the locals and staying in areas where there's a lot of locals, because they do a lot of the policing um, for the police, really. So just make sure you're always around other people. That's the safest way to avoid any dangers in Africa. In case you need an ambulance or there's a fire, the number is 10177. Um, I'm not going to read that number out, but or 112 is for National Sea and Rescue, the NSRI. Um, 10177 or 10111 is for search and rescue. If you're going to be visiting any savannas when you're there, or any nature areas, and you find a need for search and rescue for any reason, then these are the numbers you're going to want to call. Vaccinations in Africa, they no longer require for PCR tests or vaccine certification on your arrival there. And the same thing for COVID-19 regulations. They've been lifted, so you don't have to wear a mask or anything. Of course, if there's like places that want you to, then you can go ahead, but it isn't mandatory anymore. There are some recommended vaccines, such as for the chicken pox, for tetanus, the flu shot, for measles, polio, shingles, and for yellow fever. It's actually required in some areas, not in all areas, not all countries in Africa, but in some it is required, and in some places it's just really highly recommended. So for any of these vaccines, you wanna get these before a couple weeks to a couple months before you depart for Africa, for safety measures. None of these, except for the yellow flu in some areas in Africa, are required, but because Africa is a different country than the United States, and United States doesn't have as much wildlife, and there aren't as many, I guess, diseases or anything, and it's different. It's just different, and they're gonna have different things there. So it is better to contact your insurance to ask any questions that you might have for safety, for your health. And make sure you have them on a number if you want to call them if anything happens, just for an emergency kind of situation. The yellow fever vaccination, like I said, some places in Africa, some countries do require it, and some just highly recommend it. This map right here shows you which areas that's going to be. Depending on where you're going to be in Africa, you might not even go in these areas, but just be sure to plan ahead. And if you feel like you need to get the yellow fever vaccination, then go ahead and get that before you leave. Now, water quality in Africa, give or take, it can be pretty good. But in some areas, you need to be aware that contaminated water is very dangerous. So one thing that can happen is you can get leptospirosis or symptosomasis, which are both bad. They sound terrible. These things can transfer from animals, especially. So in any areas where there's just a pond of water, you see like still water, be aware that it could be dangerous. Any areas where animals are going to frequent, where they're going to drop things, where they might urinate or whatever, and the areas around them, especially the mud, they're all dangerous, and it's best just to avoid it altogether. Um, it's better to get your water in the main city, at your hotel or whatever, wherever, um, and just try to avoid just contaminated water in general. Now, let's start talking business. Um, in Africa, something that's super important for their people there is greetings. Greetings are super important in Africa and to their culture. Greetings in general give people a good sense of your character, and it gives them a good impression of you, like straight off the bat. This is similar to daily life for regular people and also for a business sense. Um, in Africa, hierarchy is visible in their culture and in their traditions. Um, they have traditional views on family hierarchy as well. Um, so if you're a woman traveling to Africa, or you're going to be working with a bunch of people who are going to be older than you, then this hierarchy is going to be very visible to you. So it's good to be aware of this beforehand so you can prepare for to speaking respectfully and having some patience with these people, because that's just their cultures are different than ours, and understanding this is going to be super important when trying to have business and talk to people there. Um, Appropriate dress wear in Africa in a business sense is important. Men are going to be wearing the traditional suit and tie, while women can wear dresses and business suits to better show off your business features, I guess. Of course, in Africa as well as a lot of other places in the world, it's a right-handed society. So when you're offering somebody your hand to shake or something, make sure you offer your right hand. Punctuality in Africa, and this goes with anywhere really, is really important. But especially in Africa, where there's a lot of people, the population in Africa is quite big, and in the cities especially, there are going to be a lot of people who all either travel through the same. They all travel kind of the same way. So punctuality is going to be important if you're not used to getting ready to go somewhere early, to even with the traffic and all the people, then you might want to start practicing getting up earlier, being ready on time. So make sure you're punctual and give yourself more time preparing before you go somewhere, because there's gonna be a lot of people. It's gonna take a lot longer for you to get anywhere, really. So just be prepared for that. Transportation and housing. First off, let's talk about transportation. In Africa, they have the Rovos rail, which is a train. And overall, this is the best transportation that you're going to get in Africa. Overall, you can go by vehicles like a car or something, but this is better if you're traveling in safari parks. Not so well in the city because, again, there's so many people. It's not going to be a very quick way of getting through a bunch of crowds and stuff. It's better just to take the rail system. They also have air travel. They have commercial flights, they have bush flights, and they have even hot air balloon rides. But these are less convenient and practical in a business sense. These are more so if you're just on your own time and trying to venture out and do your own thing. Housing in Africa. If you're just there on for a temporary time, then hotels, of course. They're always going to be available in cities. They'll also, in the cities, they'll have laundry facilities where you can do your laundry. There's going to be shopping districts all kind of close together because it's a city. Something that does happen is you might need to be relocated there for if it's going to be a longer time, um, and you might get stuck there. Sometimes they're um, getting out of Africa can be kind of difficult if you don't have all your paperwork and everything isn't in order. Um, Africa has some they have 2 yearly festivals that they have, and if when you're gonna go there is around these times, then it's gonna be booked. There's gonna be a lot of traffic, and it's gonna be hard to get out of there the time that you expected to leave. So better be prepared for any extra time that you're gonna have to stay there just because you can't get out yet. Um, and in these cases, if it's so long, then it's better not to be in a hotel. It's better to actually try to find some housing there for a while. These can be available in larger cities, prominently in Lagos, Nigeria, but especially in larger cities, there's always going to be housing and places you can go. Like I said, the 2 holidays that they have there, 2 festivals. They have the Splashy Fen Festival in March and April, and then they also have the Prince Albert Agricultural Festival in September and October. These are really big hits in Africa. They're really important, and it kind of puts a delay on everything. It's kind of like Christmas here in the States. So just be aware that. So just be aware that if you're going to be leaving, if you're going to be over there for during these times, it might take you a bit longer to get there, a little bit longer to get back. Now, regular business hours in Africa are going to be kind of similar to here in the States, give or take. Generally speaking, business hours are going to be from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Banks will be open from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Shopping and market hours from 9 a.m. And for the shopping and market, this is for more in the city. They're going to open a little bit later than in more country areas where there's a lot more land. Smaller places are going to open a little bit earlier. Government departments in South Africa are going to basically open at 8:30. Police offices are going to be open on Sunday, but they'll close by noon, so they'll close early. And generalized, it's the same as in America. Now, challenges that you might face as being a manager in Africa on behalf of our company. There's going to be some traditional values that are going to be different. Education, lack of diversity, traditional values. Like I said before, women are going to have a harder time in general, just because the culture is different. It's better to get familiarized with the culture shock that you're going to feel when you get there beforehand. Education in Africa. Now they have been doing better. There's more public schools, and there's more university applicants and people going to university, but it's still a work in progress. So with more education, some of the lack of diversity, for example, it's going to get better, but as of right now, it's still in work. So just be aware that there's going to be some differences, and there's going to be a bunch of challenges I'm sure you're going to face when you're there. Just deal with them the best that you can, and it's better to figure out what kind of differences they might have beforehand, and figure out how you would respond and face these challenges. And just start practicing now, start thinking about it now. That way when you're there, you'll be a little more figured out. Thank you and good luck.